Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar, Countdown to Reopening. This is part 2, Expert Insights on Preparing for the Future While Dealing with Uncertainty. We're going to give folks about a minute to settle in. We'll be back around 1:01 and kick off this webinar. Thank you so much for joining us today. Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar, Countdown to Reopening, Expert Insights on Preparing for the Future While Dealing with Uncertainty, Part 2. It is my pleasure to welcome Transfinder's President and CEO, Antonio Civitella, who would like to say a few words. Tony.
Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. It's Tuesday. What that means is another best practices webinar. Guys, I'm actually losing count how many we've done so far. It was just another webinar a couple hours ago, and it's like, wow, you're on all these webinars. Like, yes, we do, and it's very informative. Of course, to tell you that how valuable these webinars have been. And really, at this point, we're talking about school reopening. It's all over the news. Everyone's talking about it. What's the right thing? And of course, today's webinar is not going to be any different than other ones we always talked about. But it is summertime, so when I think of summertime, I think of the movie sequels, right? So today's webinar is a sequel to last week's webinar, which was titled Experts' Insights on Preparing for the Future While Dealing with Uncertainty, Part 2. So this is a good thing. We have great people on the panel today. We got thank you to Greg Jackson, Mark Lindstrom, Lisa Casey, and Glenn Sykes for taking time out of your very busy day to share your insight with us and really with the country today. So thank you very much. So I know across the country, schools are dealing with what ifs, all these various what if scenarios. And it's hard to plan for the future. We know this, especially when things keep changing as new cases are popping up all over the country. So today's panelists will help you realize, first of all, that you're not alone. These are issues that are challenges that we've never been dealing with in the past, but you're not alone. We're all here together. We want to learn from each other. What are the tips and approaches that each schools are using the way to reopen? And our hope is always to give you several takeaways after this webinar, so you can bring back to your offices and your district leaders. I also want to remind you this webinar is being recorded, and you'll be able to see all the recorded webinars we've done in the past few months. It's anchored off our Transfinder.com page in a best practices category. So please check it out. I actually have to keep reminding myself how many things are in there, and when I look at it, it's a holy cow that we really do all these things. Also, another big reminder: we are still offering our StopFinder communication. It's an app for district to communicate with parents. It's for free till the remainder of this calendar year. That's December 31st. For you guys not know what year it is, I know we almost want to forget 2020. We're almost halfway through on 2020, 21 is coming up soon, but I'll let you know that this tool is a great tool for you to communicate with your parents, and really a lot of our clients are using the same tool to communicate with each other and at the school district. So if you want some more information, please send us an email at freestopfinder@transfinder.com and we'll get you started. So no further ado, I really want to turn this back to Rico, the moderator for today. So Rick, take it on from here.
Thanks so much, Tony. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Before I forget, I want to make sure I reference right up front, if you have any questions, we've been getting a lot of really great questions from the attendees. I am monitoring those, as well as Bridget Moore, who is also running the app back end of this presentation. Thank you so much, Bridget. So if you have any questions, we do try to get to these as quickly as possible. The website for is stopfinder.com. Someone just asked a question already. So Brian, see there where I am listening, and if you were testing me there. You can also go to transfinder.com, and there's information as well there. So if you have a question, again, post those there. We're going to get to those as soon as we can. I want to thank Lisa Casey. I know she's not on quite yet, but if she joins us, then I want to welcome her as one of our panelists. She's with Summit School District. Greg Jackson is the Executive Director of Transportation and Fleet Services at Jeffco Public Schools. Mark Lindstrom is the General Manager of TransPar's Hawaii office. And Glenn Sykes is the Director of Transportation at Alamosa School District. So if you guys could all pop on the screen. Mark, I was mentioning earlier that you and I are the odd guys out in this panel today. We have everybody's from Colorado, except you get to be in Hawaii. Tough you. I get to be in Schenectady, New York. I think people probably would pick your location over mine. But I was thinking we could sing Rocky Mountain High to our. Maybe not. I don't want to ruin anybody's. I was going to say anybody's, ability to hear that song again and not have it replaced with my voice there. But anyway, I just want to thank you guys. I know how busy you all are in what you do to prepare for reopening, probably more so this year than ever before, as Tony was making a reference to. Before we get going, I want to kind of set the table a little bit. It's something I think we already know, but these are literally ripped from the headlines. I wanted to read a few of these stories that just came out today and yesterday. This one, lead story, how to reopen the economy without killing teachers. That's from the low-key New York Times. Another headline, Florida's largest teachers union sues state over reopening school. That's from NBC News. And from Fox News, Iowa teachers sending in their own obituaries to Governor Reynolds in protest to school reopening proclamation. NewJersey.com notes that New Jersey to allow all remote learning option for students when schools reopen in the fall. And finally, from St. Louis Today, schools reopening plans across St. Louis area vary from all in person to all online. So that's the world we live in. That's the world you live in. And that may even, you may have districts in your area that represent some piece of those types of headlines. So we're going to get into all of that. Before we do, though, I was hoping you could all introduce yourselves. I'll start with Greg, since I'm going from left to right. Greg, Mark, and Glenn. If you could introduce yourself, talk a little bit about your role in your district. That kind of gives us a sense of the scope of the work that you do, your district.
Greg Jackson, Executive Director of Transportation and Fleet Services for Jefferson County Schools in Colorado. We're western end of the Denver metro area suburbs, and also the beginning of the foothills, where we oversee a few mountain communities and within the front range of the mountains of Colorado. We have a district of over 84,000 students. We transport. We have 22,000 eligible students. I wish there was only 22. That'd be great. And we transport a high percentage of that. And every year it just fluctuates depending on the situation. So.
Great. Thanks so much, Greg. Mark.
Yes, aloha. I bring you greetings from Hawaii. So it's tough to be out here, but I've been with TransPar for 3.5 years. TransPar has actually been out here for 7 years, and they're a consultant with the Department of Education. So they've helped them actually introduce Transfinder software to help efficiency in routing, but they also work with the RFPs, and we have 8 contractors on 6 islands. So we help manage those contractors also for them. But a lot of what we do is the routing. We do a lot of special projects, and that can be from bell time analysis. We've instituted a learning management system, the online training program. We've done bus specifications for the state. So whatever the state needs, we try and be there for them. Now, Hawaii is unique. It's an island chain. It's 1,500 miles long, over 130 islands. There's only inhabitants on 7 islands. And as I said, we have 300 buses on Oahu, which is where Honolulu, Diamond Head, Waikiki, and the North Shore, the surfing. So we have challenges there because of heavy waves and tourists. And so that affects our traffic quite a bit. And then we go all the way to the island of Lanai. We only have one bus there. 98% of that island is owned by Ellison of Oracle fame. And so that's just probably the most expensive hotels in all of Hawaii are right there. And then we have Maui, and Maui, we have an isolated town. It's 52 miles of winding road all the way to Hana. We have Mount Haleakala, and that can see snow in the wintertime. So that's an interesting island. It's called the Valley Island. We have Kauai. Kauai has these majestic mountains. It has a Waimea Canyon, which is like a little Grand Canyon. But at the same time, it is one of the wettest spots in the entire world, 460 inches of rain. And so how does that affect us? All that rain goes downhill, and our little town of Hanalei, which is picturesque, beautiful bay, it gets cut off. So a lot of times we actually have to, we can't get kids to the high school, the middle school. We can get them to the elementary school. So that's a challenge. And then we go to the Big Island. Big Island is 4,000 square miles, and it's the only island you can actually drive around. But that has volcanoes. So 2 years ago, we were closing roads because we had the lava flows from Kilauea. So, I dealt with snow in Atlanta, and then all of a sudden, I got this call, hey, you got to close some roads and change some buses because of lava flow. Well, I never expected that. So
Wow.
There's always something going on.
Tony, if you're still on, maybe we could create a product like Lava Finder.
So actually, Transfinder software really helped us because we had to figure out where the kids were and where we could pick them up. And so it really worked pretty well. And then we have the island of Molokai. We actually have 3 contractors, but we only have 20 buses. And that's a pretty isolated island. We actually drive to the end of the road, and our students get off, and they have to walk about 2 miles back in the valley. We can't even get a bus down there. So all these challenges make it very interesting.
You see a big scope of stuff.
Yeah, and our school district we have 168,000 students. We transport 34,000 students, 10% which are sped. We run just over 660 buses, but 40% of the buses are special ed. So special ed, we have to really get a grip and really provide great service to those kids. So, that's the big challenge of how to deal with all these, trying to get all the special needs kids to school on time, and then deal with all the regular ed routes. And our big challenge is we start in 2 weeks.
Yeah, you're getting, don't get ahead of me. But you are the canary in the coal mine. As I mentioned, you are the first district that we've had on a webinar that's opening that closely, that soon. So, so thank you so much, Mark. Glenn, you want to tell us a little bit about you and your district?
Hello, everybody. So I'm Glenn. I'm the Director of Transportation down here in Alamosa. So we're southern Colorado, very rural, up in the mountains. It's a large valley, but it's also a desert. So where Mark gets 166 inches in that one area, we get 5 to 6 for the year. Extreme conditions as far as temperature, the other direction, 30 below, pretty normal for us in the winter. Not a lot of snow in the valley floor, but everywhere we go. We can't hardly play a game in the valley. All of our traveling is over mountain passes in one direction or another.
Wow.
Lots of distance. We're not a very big school. We are the largest in the area. We've got about 2,300 students. I run 12 daily routes. The area is about 40,000 people is all for the whole area, but it's a very large spread out. There's 14 districts within the area is all, but we kind of run the area as one giant school district. We're doing that more and more collaboration. I'm actually involved with 3 other districts within the valley as we implement more things, do more changes, and my wife is also another director of transportation here. So we kind of tag team everything. Unfortunately, we always bring work home.
At a different school district? She's at a different school district?
For 2 different school districts, yes. Yeah.
How does
so we manage 3.
Is that competition? or?
I don't really know how it happened. I started sub driving years ago, actually back in 2013, and I've worked all the way up to the director, and she came in as my sub because I was activity driving, and then now she's the director, and I don't know, I guess you can say it's in the family. So
I love it. I love it. Super, super. So got some general questions first, and again, I'm monitoring the questions here from our attendees, so keep them coming. But I want to start again with Greg, and just in general, what's the main issue right now that you are facing as you focus on reopening? And then all three of you guys, if you don't mind addressing that one. I won't always have you all have to answer every question, but could you start off with just the main issue you're facing in reopening?
I think one of the biggest things has been the inconsistency of, I call it the different changes to what kind of direction you want to do in the first place. So, we got a challenge of the capacity factor. Having a 30 capacity is what I can transport, and for the numbers of students I need to transport, that's one of the challenges. Next challenge is, one moment we're looking at a certain type of restart, because currently we're looking at 100% in-person learning to 100% remote learning. So we have a survey out currently that you have an option to opt in or opt out. And on that same survey, we actually have transportation has its own little tab on there, for we can actually get information from the folks who are opting in. We can get that information and say, hey, if you're coming into school and you're an eligible rider, will you use transportation? And so then we get to subtract and remove the individuals who elected to stay remote from that. So it brings down our numbers so we can have a better snapshot when we're building routes. And Transfinder, this morning, I got a heads up from my guru who does a lot of my work for me and build the databases, is assisting us in a way of being able to not have to delete the students, but having a different way of approaching it. So we're looking at it right now. That was what we were looking our direction. At first, we were looking at a hybrid. I think a lot of us were looking at hybrids, or looking at a certain portion of remote versus in person. But one thing that I think the first decision was, we wanted to focus on the most highly impacted students, which was our special needs students, making sure that we decided to go 100% back for our students. And that's for even the internal areas, but also we have placed out of district sites that our students go to, that we will be transporting them to those sites. So our biggest challenges was just, again, lack of communication at times coming from, certain levels. And, where from a cabinet standpoint, one thing is, another part is that we have multiple districts surrounding us. And so we have all these districts who have a different plan. Districts are going to be concerned about student enrollment. So you don't want to lose enrollment. So you want to kind of be uniform some way. So I know that my district, which is Jefferson County, was talking with Cherry Creek, Aurora Public Schools, Denver Public Schools, and they were all kind of working every day about what you're going to do. So the funniest part about this is we're all in, and then all of a sudden, just when we made our call on the 8th of July, Denver Public Schools changed theirs, and a few others changed theirs, and we're like, okay, great. So are we going to change again? So we're kind of still in that world of, are we going to continue to stay the same path, or are we going to change that path?
The word you just said that, I was thinking a word that keeps coming up in all of our webinars has been this word flexible. It sounds like you've had to become flexible and say, well, we said this on July 8th. You probably want to say, can we pick a decision and go on? But then you're seeing things out on the, boots on the ground, and then you got to make those alterations.
Yeah, and I think the biggest part is that you never want to lose enrollment, and that's kind of the biggest purpose. And because we're so close to each other, because we have myself, Douglas County to the south of us, I got Boulder County, Boulder Valley to the north of me, Denver to the east of me, and then I got other districts that are surrounding me on the west side. But then you still have everybody clumped there together, and we're just trying to make sure that we all retain our students and then try to provide the services to them. So it's been a challenge.
I'm going to come back to you. We're going to roll around, and then because I want to hear where you guys have all landed right now. I know, Mark, you represent more than one entity, right? More than one school. Is that correct, or is it one school still? in Hawaii?
No, well, it's one school system, 256 for public schools, over 256 schools. Yes.
Okay. So are you seeing a variety of plans in that mix?
Oh yes.
Okay, so we'll come back. We'll come back to that. I'm sorry. Go ahead. I just wanted to get your sense of what your main issue is.
We got 256 different schools, so 256 principals, as I would like to say, captains of their own ship, and they have full autonomy. So one of our challenges, and this is why we're going to put Transfinder software to the test here. We have 3 models. One, they can go face-to-face. So 13% of our schools have decided to do that. They can choose hybrid, which is you go Monday, Tuesday, and the next group goes Wednesday, Thursday, and then Friday is virtual. But special needs goes every day, and vulnerable students go every day. We don't know who those vulnerable students are, so we have to run all the bus routes until we can figure that out. And then the third option is a hybrid option. So certain kids will go every day, and certain kids will do the A, B, C, D schedule. But we don't know who those students are. The other thing is the bell times. Principals choose their own bell times. So we don't get to mold that at all. We're completing a bell time analysis for them because we think we can help quite a bit. Probably save them about $8 million a year, but that's a tough sell because principals are used to, hey, if I want to start at 7:15, I start at 7:15. If the middle school is right next door and they want to start at 7:20, they'll start at 7:20. So how do you route that and how do you deal with that? And that's what we're waiting on now. We know what model they picked, but we only have 1/3 of the I would say bell time. So we're getting that this week. So our router is going to be they're going to be up late trying to massage all this and do the best job. And like I said, we have 8 contractors, and we have to get the information to these contractors ahead of time so they can train their people. So that's a big challenge. And our contractors are great. They work well with the DOE, and they'll do anything for the kids. So it's a good position to be in when you know you have partners on the other side that will really help.
Great. Thank you so much, Mark. How about you, Glenn? What's the main issue that you've been facing, your district's been facing as it's looking at reopening?
So for our area, a lot of it really stems back to that kind of communication point and the fact that things weren't being communicated to begin with, and then finally stuff starts to trickle out. Not really, like Mark, we don't have any input on bell times really. Even for such a rural area, they want all the kids here at a certain point, and it's not something that we can always adhere to. We may end up not being able to bus any of our country kids because of it, because we just don't have enough time to go all the way out on enough buses. We don't know yet how that one's going to fly with parents. I have seen kind of a difference in the valley between the different schools. There are areas that the parents are really wanting to stay 100% online. I think that's going to really direct that. And then you go across the valley to another school and they actually want to be in school. Alamosa is kind of right in the middle of that. Where we have most of the jobs in the valley are located in Alamosa. A lot of bedroom communities, so people drive in anyway, so they're already bringing their kids. So we're really encouraging self-transportation, but we're also very, very poverty-stricken. So it's difficult for us to ask parents to do very much because they just don't have anything to do. I mean, we've been feeding since March 19th. We started food routes, and they've gone every single weekday since then.
Wow.
Over 700 meals a day we deliver just to keep our kids, and that's just this district. It's just Alamosa.
Wow.
So there's I think for us really the poverty and getting people access to those kids access to what they need to succeed is going to be our biggest challenge.
But all 3 of your districts are opening this fall, like within person. Glenn, you and I chatted, and you have a little bit of a unique approach, and I want to bring yours up. We'll talk. We'll get back to Greg and Mark about your approaches to the opening day. But Glenn, Bridget, could you move to the next slide, and Glenn, tell us a little bit about what we're seeing and what your approach is, and also even like the unique, where you got the idea from it. So I'll let you take it away from here.
Sure. So yeah, this kind of came out. I spent about an hour and a half in a Zoom meeting with my assistant super, and that's when I learned that they were going to do 3 staggered start times with multiple groups, and she explained this whole thing to me, and they wanted 15 minutes in between, and it was very overwhelming. I came out of my office, and I was just like, there's no way I can do this. It's not going to work. It's not going to function. I can't do it. And it was a lot to process. So I grabbed my coordinator and my mechanics. Said, guy, let's go sit down. I need to vent. I need to explain to you where we're at, and I want your ideas. Put it out there. Anything's game. So we did. We sat down. We started talking, and I kind of gave him a real brief run through of what my assistant had said, what they were expecting, and how they're planning to run everything. And I said, how do you see this going? One of my mechanics, he actually has only been turning wrenches for us for a couple of years now, but he started as a sub, and he's one of those subs that you wish you had 1,000 of them, because he can drive every single route at the drop of a hat. He knows them in and out. He just has that little something. So just like me, he knows every single route and how to do it. And he may not be up to date on every single stop every day, but you can make it happen.
Hey, Glenn, before you keep going, be careful what you say, because I can see Greg nodding his head. He's probably going to try to recruit the guy, so be careful.
Yep. I wouldn't blame you. I'm not going to let you have him, but I wouldn't blame you. And so I told him that, I wanted to do this breakdown. I wanted to split the district into 4 areas, which is kind of what this model demonstrates. Now, granted, this is very, very very early, but I was thinking I started explaining this. Well, we're going to go to this area, we're going to bus all these kids, and we're going to go to this area, we're going to bus all these kids in. We're going to have a lot of cohort mixing. So we're going to have, because we've always been K-12 buses. We only ever had, actually 2 of our in-town buses were tiered, elementary and then middle high school. So some reason I was stuck with that K-12 in my head. I've got to have K-12 on my buses. I've got to have K-12 on my buses. Well, with the district saying, well, you're not going to have the resources and the time to go out into the country, do we really have to have that on the table, or can we mix this up? And so this mechanic said, well, why don't we just take one bus to one school back and forth? So instead of taking every single bus to each single campus and unloading, we can just go to and from that school, unload, do our sanitizing, turn it around, get right back out there. And that was really when it clicked. So I said, okay, hold on, let's start drawing this, because I'm visual. Jump up on the whiteboard, and I actually have a picture of it, and nobody understands it completely, because it kind of looks like chicken scratch. But we just started drawing this out, and it kind of came together. So as you can see here, kind of in quadrant 1, the thought there is there'll be 3 buses for each quadrant. Elementary will begin with the group A, so they're going to break our K-5 into 3 groups of cohorts, 3 big groups, and then each one has its own cohort within it. We'll go out, we'll bus in those kids for group A that starts, I believe, around 7:15 at this point, 7:20. We'll do that sanitizing, go back out and get to group B. We're going to bring each of those in for every single level. With seniors, we don't really do a whole lot of busing with anyway, so I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time trying to, if we got to squeeze one in here or there, we will. And we'll still do family groups. So if we go to a house that has 2 kids in group A and 1 kid in group B, just because of the age, more than likely, we'll go ahead and bust in that group B student. They're going to be held at their waiting point in the school, where they're going to go and do all the screening. We did work to get the temperature checks taken off of the bus driver's plate. I worked with my health director, and just, that's a lot of time. It was going to increase our load time exponentially. And so I thought, well, let's get that gone. And she agreed. So they're going to do all the screening at the school. They are asking that if we notice some of those symptoms, that we try to isolate that student. I told them, well, there's only one door in and out, so they're walking past somebody or somebody's walking past them, but we'll do our best. But the one nice thing about this is, should we get a positive, well, not should, you know, it's not a if, it's a when. And how many times between now and Christmas do we have positives? How many times do we shut down?
Right.
Since only 4 buses are going to each campus, the goal or the hope is that worst case scenario, we only shut down 4 of the 12 buses at a time, because they're only going to be working with. Yeah, would you please?
Yeah, Bridget, you want to move to the next slide?
And so we can only actually shut down certain sections. This is an actual just Google map of Alamosa. The nice thing with this plan is, if you notice up around, you see Adams State University, right up there in the northwest area. That's a walk zone for our middle and high school students. So those 2 tiers, those 2 groups of buses, I won't be busing kids in that area for that age. So I'm just going to move those 2 buses into an area of higher need. That's why I say this is kind of a basic model. You can move it around as need be, but so I can get more busing for an area. The southeast area has a lot higher population, especially of our vulnerable children. So we may be running 3 high school buses just in that area, but they'll still only be carrying their kids. So again, we reduce that cohort mixing as much as we can, and we really increase our turnaround time, or decrease our turnaround time, I'm sorry, so we can get in and out to those campuses, because they're located all around town. So that was the thought there, and then be able to manage it. I don't know, that outer ring is probably about as far as we're going to get out of town at this point in time, with not much outside of our limits.
I love that story for many reasons. One is just to create, we can get locked in. I know whatever your career, whatever you do, you can kind of get locked in sometimes of seeing things a certain way. It's not because you're closed-minded, but it's just you have just a certain way of seeing things, as you said, Glenn. And then all of a sudden, the mechanic came in and had a real fresh perspective, and I just love that. You know, I know you listened to him, and you know, you saw the value in it. So, Greg and Mark, go ahead. I'm sorry. A little bit about how your opening day is going to look, and you know, I guess that first semester.
You want to go first, Mark, or? Well, how I look at it for us is that we're trying to really focus on who's actually going to use the service, is what we're trying to do. With the capacity challenges we have, again, yes, when we had a chance to speak with Glenn before talking on this, it was like, wow, it's like you said, you get some from outside of that scope of your way of thinking, and thinking outside that box, and put all your stakeholders involved, having that conversation. And, you know, one thing that after, you know, some of the things, you know, seeing that quadrant structure is like we got some very similar quadrant blocks of how we're doing it, in block areas of trying to cover and trying to do as much turnaround as possible. The unfortunate part is that we got away from doing the actual temp checking. We wanted us to do that first at a stop. We kind of realized that there's too much of a liability that comes from that, because we were trying to get parents to be there and present, which we know in this business that's kind of pulling teeth, and you're asking for a lot for that custody of the exchange. So we're looking at either process to we're doing an RFP currently to get the temperature check sensors on our buses, and being able to do a temp check as they're going off the bus and then at the school. And when they get to the school, we will have staff at the school will support the bus drivers in a way as the student get off, and be able to, if a student has a temperature, now first we're going to ask parents to make sure that they are actually signing an acknowledgement that they will temp check their kid before they leave home. You know, now we're doing that just to make sure that we are trying to reinforce the parents that this is seriousness, and we want you to make sure you do so. Keep your student home. And then once they, you know, get on a bus, we get them to the school, we do another temp check. If that student has a temperature for some reason, we will have them go over here to, it's called a containment area. They'll go with one staff member at the school, which is most likely a nurse, and the other group will go through a separate door, because the schools are going to open up a half an hour prior so we can get students in, and they're going to be temperature checking at the doors of the school. So we're having our bus riders go through a separate door. You don't have to go through the screening all over again. So
Who's doing the actual, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Who's doing the actual temperature checking?
So until we get the scanners on our buses, our driver's going to be doing it as they're unloading the bus.
Okay.
And so we got the ones with the little guns, and we can do a little check, and they have to ask 3 questions, and the question's going to be, from a symptom standpoint, did you have runny nose, sore throat, have a cough, and then we know if you have a temperature or not from a standpoint of the temperature check that we got to do. We're trying to be like, Glenn, we're trying to get away from that as much as possible, because we're communicating. We need more frequency to pick up more bodies, and having the 1/3 of our capacity, we have to have more time to turn around. But we do have more of an area where schools are going to be open for a longer period of time. But the part that we're still working on is we can't take all the students on the back end. So the schools have to remain. They need to be there with the students, because especially in the suburban areas, turnarounds are going to be faster. But in the mountain areas, those are longer stretches of how we get students back and forth to school. So we're hoping to continue to have more dialogue, which is trying to maybe do a lottery standpoint, because we already got folks opting into the process. But if looking at our numbers are still going to be too high, is maybe do something on the lines of restricting or eliminating high school busing. Just trying to find what we can do to look at and leverage the highest numbers and highest populations is what we're trying to do. And some of our districts around us are doing those type of measures right now. And we're trying to, model that same thing.
Greg, real quickly, because we got a question from Catherine. I want to go to something you just said, and then we'll go to you, Mark. Wants to know, why can't the bus staff, do scans prior to drop off at the school, like before they actually get on the bus? What's the reasoning?
The reason behind that was that it was a situation of what happens, because in Colorado you can't, and I think in many states you really can't just leave a student at a bus stop. So now you have a custody issue. So if you have a student that comes to your bus, you go and do the temp check, and they have a temperature. Most parents are going to drop that student off at the stop, and then you have an elementary school student who has to go home. Right. We had a few things that happened here in Colorado over the last 10 years of students wandering away and being abducted and things like that. So we don't want to ever put our students into that situation. So right. That's where a lot of talks and a lot of discussions were really big on what do we do. And so first we were trying to get parents to be there. And again, we knew that was going to be what happens with that first student that the parent is not there, not present. And we don't want to have a punitive action towards the student when it was a parent's,
Right. Well, I think Jennifer just gave you a shout out, because she said also that taking a temp takes the driver's focus away from loading and danger zone. So, Mark, a little bit for you about what's reopening look like for you guys. And I know you said you're seeing a broad array of approaches.
Right. Well, we thought we had everything planned, and then the Hawaii State Teachers Association had to negotiate with the DOE because of social distancing at the school. They definitely wanted at least 6 feet. So we had already heard from the Department of Health, which said we didn't have to social distance 6 feet on the bus. So our plan now, as we load students, we're going to load as if we only have 12 students on a 48 passenger bus. When we hit number 13, then we're going to load it as we have 24 students, 1 per seat. And just like Greg said, we don't want to leave a child at the bus stop, so we will load and put 2 children to a seat, and that'll sort of trigger an emergency situation in the sense that the driver will call dispatch, they'll call the school, let them know that we are putting 2 children to a seat. And then, but we'll, if we have 10 kids, we're going to pick up the 10 kids, just let everybody know what's going on, document it, but we're going to get those kids to school. That's probably the most, that's safer than leaving them at the bus stop, as Greg mentioned, especially when they're smaller. The other challenge we have, the first 9 days are half days, and then we switch to full-time in the afternoon. So again, we're going to be flexing that Transfinder software a little more than usual, because normally we start out with full days, but this time we're going to do the half days for 9. It brings us to, I guess, Labor Day, No, it can't be late. Oh, we have another state holiday in there. So it brings us to that state holiday. So we have the 9 days, and then we'll go full time after that. So that's our biggest challenge once we start of flexing that afternoon schedule again. So once you have it set and everybody's in a routine, after a couple of days, we're going to change that routine up and change the afternoons again. But at least we'll have the mornings down, hopefully. And again, we're going to run all the buses, all 660 odd buses, because we don't know the list of vulnerable students that might be going to school every day. So we have to run them until it kind of balances out a little bit. And maybe this, because I don't think the schools know who those students are yet, so they can't tell us. So I think that's the biggest challenge for us. But getting okay from the Department of Health of putting 2 students to a seat, that was a big thing. And again, we don't want to do that, but we will do it instead of leaving students.
And we talked about this a little bit yesterday. Diane just reminded me, but brothers and sisters can sit in the seat together, so you kind of try to do that as well when you can to kind of get more students on a bus in compliance with your overall policy, correct?
Yeah, so I mean, we've had the blessing from the Department of Health, and they've looked at each bus as a bubble. So those same students are going to ride together, go to school together, and stay in that bubble at school. And so the Department of Health feels like we'll have less transmission. Now, Hawaii in itself is a bubble. We're like New Zealand. We have 1,397 positive cases. That's it in the entire state. So we've managed that. But the problem by managing that is we've killed the tourist industry. Well, that's a big deal. At one time, 37% of our tourist industry was out of work. It's gone quite down. I think overall our state unemployment's like 14% now. But tourist industry, if it doesn't come back, the economy, it will take years.
Yeah. I promise you, Hawaii will come back. We all want to go there.
Governor.
Glenn, there was a question from you, but I want to make sure if there's anything. I don't know if anything you want to. Remember, this is a conversation, so if there's anything you want to piggyback on. But I do have a question from somebody in attendance who wanted to know about: are your drivers doing a complete sanitization of the bus between runs, or not? And then also, what are they using? That's some questions people really want to know the specifics. If there's a insider secret on the best sanitizing materials to use. But are there?
So yeah, we'll do a full spray down between each route, or each tier, I guess you call it. They'll do wipe down in any areas that get soiled so that the actual cleaning agent can work. Currently, I'm using an agent called Virex. It's pretty mainstream. A lot of people use it. That'll be our in-betweens throughout the day, and then we're going to be using a full electrostatic every night on every single bus. We're getting these backpack units coming in to do that in the evenings to make sure that bus, by the time the next day, there really shouldn't be anything allowed, still alive in there. We're also going to greatly cut down on things like students and open windows, so that to reduce the touch points. Obviously, as much as we can. We know students kind do what they do, but the goal is to try to reduce those touch points as much as we can. And then, like I said, do that full spray down. Hopefully, I'm hoping it to take about 10 minutes between runs is my goal.
Stanley wants to, I'll do a piggyback question, I think, from Stanley, wanting to know if you're paying your drivers more time for post trips since they have to clean the buses.
Yeah, so they'll just, our drivers are just paid hourly, so they will stay on the clock until they're done every day. With the changes in the Colorado law, how we do the entire pre-trip in the morning now and not have to do a pre-trip in the afternoon, we cover it for the day. We're gonna just adjust some of our timing and we used to have a large kind of not downtime, but another pre-trip time in the afternoon that really isn't used anymore. We're going to shift that to the back end, because every single day at the end of the day, that bus will get a full physical wipe down with some sort of a contact wipe. Because the way it was explained to me, for these, especially the electrostatic machine, to work properly, there can't be any soil on that surface that doesn't allow that material to actually adhere to the germs. And so it's gonna be a lot of training. We're gonna be coming in for that in a couple of weeks to start learning how to scrub our buses better. I don't think any of that's a bad thing, though. I think that's probably something we could have been doing better all along. And I foresee some of these practices, once this whole thing does, however this evolves, they're not going to go away. They may reduce, but I don't see a lot of these practices going away in the future.
Great. Now, one person just asked a question about the age of your drivers. Let's see here. What percentage of your drivers would you say are at risk, over 65, or other health issues? I think somebody mentioned all of your drivers are coming back except one, if I remember that correctly. But is there any concern that some drivers are going to say, this is the year I'm going to retire just because I don't want to be hassled, or how are you dealing with that? Because we're still dealing with a driver shortage, in much of the country. Anybody want to tackle that?
I know for us, I'll jump in. Probably right at half of my crew is 60 plus, and I have people mid 70s, so it's a huge concern. At this point, everyone's pretty much coming back. Some of it's really dependent on sports. We do a lot of activity driving, and that's really kind of where for us that's really where the cream of the crop is. So that's going to be our biggest question, and that looks even less today after talking to the AD, so I don't know. I was feeling better about it 2 weeks ago than I am today, to be honest with you. I don't know. Thankfully, I'm still getting some applications if they'll let me go ahead and start hiring people. But the demographics of the crew is probably going to change some, for sure.
Anybody else have any thoughts on that?
I'm right about 35% of my workforce is at that high risk level, and we do a letter of intent where we send out and we give it to them in the middle of April. We need them to have it back by the 15th of May. And so it kind of gives us a kind of a snapshot of how many folks are coming back. However, over the summer, you never know what's going to happen. So right now we are down from folks who made decisions to retire, or a second retirement for some of our folks. Because we had individuals who were just like what Glenn was sharing, is they're up there in that age, and they were to say, well, you know what, with COVID being what it is, it's unknown. So I don't want to bring it back to my family. I don't want to take that chance. So a lot of folks retired or just resigned from their positions. So we had a hiring freeze right up to pretty much around the 15th of June. And since that time, we're trickling in, not to a point that we would hope that it'd be higher. But we're going to have our challenges on again, drivers. That's why we're going to be looking at trying to find out the opt-in, opt-out type structure to make sure that we know who's actually going to need the service versus providing it, just looking at the broad numbers. So we're 35%.
Okay, wow. Mark, anything you want to add?
No, we have 8 contractors, so they all have different challenges. Actually, some of the smaller islands, they say all their drivers are coming back, and we really haven't had that extreme driver shortage that the mainland has had. So we've been in pretty good shape, less than 5% some days, and sometimes that's just the flu and the illness. I did want to say something that Glenn mentioned. One of the things when I was in Marietta City in Georgia, we did during flu, well, actually twice a year, we did this deep sanitizing of our buses, and then all our drivers cleaned the tops of the seats and did the handrails every day after each route. And we also had hand sanitizer on the bus. And we did this like 5 years ago, and we did it because of the normal flu season. So as Glenn said, this is something we should all think about. We still have once we get, let's say, a vaccine for COVID, we still have the normal flu season, and just as many people get sick and people pass away because of the flu. So we should really continue this. So, you know, Glenn was, you know, correct. We can't forget the lessons that we learned going through this when COVID's over, and just say, oh, you know, let's get to next year. We need to take these lessons learned and apply them to the out years.
That's great. Actually, that's a perfect segue to a poll question I want to ask about life and post-pandemic schools and what tools could be useful. So I'm going to ask this. This is for all those attendees. You see this poll on your screen, hopefully. It says, what tools would you like to implement post-pandemic? And I just like the expression post-pandemic, even though, like you just said, Mark, we need to make sure we're still being vigilant after this pandemic passes, and it will pass. But here are some tools. I'm curious to hear what would be a priority for you. Upgrading your routing software, student attendance, which is very big right now. Driver navigation, parent app, and cameras on the bus. We'll keep this up for just about a minute. But any of our panelists, do you have any thoughts on what your priorities will be after the pandemic? I'll ask Greg first, and then Mark and Glenn.
One thing, we just completed a pretty much an RFP where we're doing the student attendance pretty much, which is student tracking. One, we're going to use it as not just student tracking for on and off the bus, but also for contact tracing purposes. So we can identify who was on our bus. And so if we do have an outbreak where we have a student or so who comes on and is COVID positive, we can now go from what we know from what our public health folks are saying. You can look back, you have to look back to roughly, they said 48 hours. And so going from 40 hours back, then you have an opportunity to kind of say who was riding that bus and who that student came in contact with. So then we can communicate to our parents and to the communities of that school and potentially what happened, and then so we can get that group and that cohort and that school pretty much moving into a quarantine factor. And then cameras was another thing we did too. So we just finished up another RFP for cameras on that too. Good.
Thanks, Greg. How about you, Mark?
Well, we have cameras on all our buses. We're looking at a parent app, but one of the biggest things is attendance. So right now I'm actually working on what I would call a special project for the state, looking at student attendance. And there's so many different ways of doing it. I won't mention the companies, but you have a company that can actually do it based off the camera system. And then you have some amazing tablets that, the driver doesn't have to get involved too much. And then you have the card readers and RFID cards and things like that. So there's so much out there. And it's a balance of, cost versus return, and and then longevity. How long is that system going to last you before you have to replace? And some companies, they'll give you the equipment up front. You just have to pay a monthly fee. But it's pretty amazing when it can be done from a tablet, an RFID card, and then actually from the camera system. They identify the kids as they come on board. So technology is incredible. It amazes me of how much it's changed in the last 20 years.
Yeah, absolutely.
I remember the old VCR tapes, right? Having to change VCR tapes every day. Yeah. So what the companies are out there doing is just, I can't imagine what it'll be like in 10 years. Right? Oh, yeah. So what I think may work now, in 10 years, they're going to surpass that, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. How about you, Glenn?
So funny enough, since I took over, pretty much all those things on that list have been points I've been working towards. Routing was first thing, got that up and running. And actually the student attendance and parent app finally got everything ready to go this March, just after all this stuff began. So we'll actually be rolling that out this fall. Really going to rely heavily on that for that contact tracing, and to try to see, that where do we need to shift some buses? Do we need to add one? Do we really looking at that for the optimization? The part that we're working on is the cameras. Those are the slowest coming along, but those are coming along pretty well. About half the fleet so far. Unfortunately, with budget cuts this year, that's probably not going to be doing a whole lot. But just trying to really bring our district out of the I say the 20th century. Part of it was in the 19th century, it felt like, but really getting everything up and going and running so that we can be efficient, because we're obviously doing a lot more now with a lot less people. Again, seems like every year we do that. So streamlining is just getting to be so important.
Yeah, that's great. Hey, Bridget, do you have the results of the poll results?
Yes, I do. Of those who voted, 69% are looking to implement student attendance, 57% a parent app, 42% driver navigation, 40% upgrade the routing software, and then 22% are looking at cameras on the bus.
Okay, very good. It doesn't add up to 100 because we let them pick 2. So very good. Thanks so much, Bridget. That's awesome.
You're welcome.
I want to touch on 2 different things, and I know we're kind of getting close to the end, but I'd like to ask, just lessons learned so far in this. I think that one of the things that, how much more are you going to be, how much more valuable? I mean, you're already all valuable. You're all seasoned pros, but having gone through this, your knowledge base is just so much more deeper now. I just wanted curious, would you say like a lesson learned from this experience that you say, here's how I was back in March, and here's how it's kind of changed me maybe a little bit, or our operation here 4 months later. I'm going to ask all 3 of you, and you can answer in any order you like.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll go first. I would say about 10 years ago, I had a assistant superintendent who talked about pandemics, right, and the flu, and we looked at the Spanish flu years ago, and I remember sitting in that room going, when are you talking about just flu, and here we are 10 years later, and it's so much more complicated than I ever imagined. And I dealt with snow and ice and, early mornings and now lava. And my gosh, who would have ever, 2 years ago, I thought, hey, I've been through everything, right? So, and now we have this COVID. So it's, as Greg mentioned before, you have to be flexible, right? And you have to, if you think nothing's going to happen, you need to reawaken and say anything can happen. And so I think the whole industry, what I'm impressed about are all these webinars, right? And it's just not Transfinder and STN, it's NAPT and NSTA. Everybody's come together to kind of pull things together and help us all and help us develop these safety plans for our contractors in our states and our local districts. Coming together has been a key thing. That's what I've seen, because I was a member of GAPT for a long time, and I always remember when I went to the Georgia conferences, we all worked together. And if I needed something, even if I needed a bus, my local district that surrounded me would lend me a sped bus if that's what I needed. So we all helped each other, and you see this again with this COVID response of everybody coming together trying to help each other.
I think that this
10 years ago, I would have never expected a giant flu epidemic, right?
Right. I am so amazed at this industry, and you're right, just how collaborative, and they just really live like it's a calling, really. So yeah, I've been so impressed how everyone's come together. Greg or Glenn?
As a Mark, you hit everything on the nose right there, because that's the lesson learned, is everything you said. It's you're never prepared for the next thing, which was, you always think of, like here in Colorado, snow and and so forth, and weather and floods and fires. But then this is a pandemic. This is a virus. This is something that's invisible. You can't really combat it, but you have to learn how to now, like you said, be flexible and also change your ways. And so one big thing that I think from this came from was really getting your voice out there to those decision makers who are cabinet members. I've heard from a lot of my colleagues here in Colorado around the metro area, they were not being heard. And we would get together, and we started having more get-togethers where we were doing, thank God for video, it's easier to get together on our schedules and to sit here and start talking about strategies together on how we can partner and piggybacking off of each other. You know, putting our health plans together and then combining them together. And again, I think it helped. Where I think Colorado is one of those states that we're very connected with each other. We have CSPTA, which this year we're trying to come back to do our get together and do the summit we've done in the past down in Pueblo, and we had to cancel that. But the one thing I think our districts all got to see is that how flexible we are and how durable we are in doing our jobs. I always call it, we're the fixers of the districts when it comes down to providing services. We find the ways, we put the puzzles together, and then this has been a larger puzzle. And again, I think we're all getting together, working together to try to get through it.
That's awesome. Thanks so much, Greg. And Glenn, the final word.
Yeah. So no pressure. Yeah. It really. They're both on point, the collaboration, the working together. And I think this is something you and I talked about, Rick, when we first chatted last week, that kind of clicked for me. You know, when it comes to the school running, the day-to-day in and out, we're the first there, we're the last there. We're the ones we're that backbone that I think gets lost a lot. And I'm not trying to put down anything on food and maintenance, and we're all in this thing together. We're all parts of this, spokes of this wheel. But I think at the end of the day, our industry as a whole has an ability to problem solve last minute things unlike anything I've ever been involved with. And that becomes off the collaboration and the sharing of knowledge and the working together and realizing that there's other views out there that maybe that will work for my area, maybe it won't. But taking those chances and putting yourself out there and man, there's no way to not to be flexible this year. You got to do it. You're going to be flexible, or you're not going to do it. It's just not going to happen. So it's really cool to be part of, and the professionalism and just, wow, look what we can do. And you know, we're all last minute. Everything's going to change, and we're starting school. And Mark, I know that night before you guys start, you're going to still be making stuff changes and adjustments, and we're doing the same thing. And those first 3 weeks are going to be rough. They will be, but we'll get through it. We do every year. So
that's good. That's almost like reassuring in a way, you know. Tough times may come, but you know, tough people last. You know, you're gonna be able to. You will see the light at the end of the tunnel. You all seem like you have a place at the table with decision makers in some respect. Am I right? That they listen to you. So I just want to encourage you, because you touched on this. Some of you have touched on this a little bit during this webinar, and then I got to close this out. And I'm amazed at how fast it went. It always does. But I just wanted to encourage whoever's listening, if you don't feel like your voice is being heard, there was a webinar we did a few weeks back called Getting a Seat at the Table of Decision Makers, that I think might be valuable, because there were some very, very specific ideas of how to, because transportation is such a key, you can't make decisions in a vacuum. And as Glenn just said, you guys just kind of get it done. So sometimes it can be taken for granted, like, okay, we're going to have this schedule over here, and not really necessarily think about what the implications are to transportation and how that's actually going to come together in the logistics. And so I just want to encourage you to go to transfinder.com and look for our best practices page, which is anchored off of our homepage, and then scroll down and look for that title of Getting Your Seat at the Table. Greg, Mark, Glenn, I just want to thank you so much. I know how crazy busy you are, and just thank you for sharing with us today. I want to encourage attendees, if you have a story to share, because much of these webinars are really built on real people, real districts, real examples of things you're doing to serve your communities better. And so we want to gather, and this is not just TransFinder clients, this is any school in the country, North America. We'd love to hear your story. So just email mystory@transfinder.com, and it may make itself in a webinar, or maybe a white paper, or both. So until next Tuesday, we're going to have another webinar on July 28th. I just want to thank everybody again for coming. I want to thank our panelists once again, and I wish you all just a great rest of your day. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.